Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at EAC's webinar. My name is Jessica Mogelson, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator here at EAC. Today, we will be talking about how you can create 3D animations and illustrations for interactive service documentation. We will begin today's session with an introduction of EAC, and then Todd Liebenow, our Technical Account Manager, will provide us with an overview of Creo Illustrate along with a product demonstration. The session is being recorded. Unless there are any technical difficulties, everyone will receive a replay after the webinar. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat and we will answer them after the presentation. I do see some familiar names, but for those of you who don't know who we are, I'll start off with a quick introduction of EAC. At EAC, we are dedicated to help companies transform the way they design, manufacture, connect to, and service their products. We do this by offering engineering and design services such as software support, implementation, training, and product and part design. We have a range of products and services that we sell, including CAD, product lifecycle and service lifecycle management software, as well as the Form 2 desktop 3D printer. We implement the Internet of Things and augmented reality into business strategies, offer help with design and engineering products, and we offer training courses and webinars for continuous learning. We've partnered with PTC to deliver today's leading industry software, and we are specifically focusing on the aspects of PTC's Creo Illustrate software and all of its capabilities. With our wide product lines and capabilities, we offer a number of webinars to keep everyone updated with new features, tips, and tricks. Tune in on August 29th to learn about Creo topology and September 12th to learn about MathCAD and all they have to offer. You can find out more about our upcoming webinar topics on our website at eacpds.com/events. With that, I'll pass it on to Todd to discuss how you can create 3D illustrations and animations for interactive service documentation. Todd, take it away.
All right, good. All right, so hey, good morning, everybody. So want to take you through a few things as far as creating some documentation, illustrations, and figures, those types of things for use downstream in other documents and applications. So to start with, just a quick walkthrough of some Windchill stuff, right? So the thought process here is I'm going to create some documentation, figures, and those types of things for this mountain bike front fork suspension. So obviously we're starting off with the design here in Creo Parametric in this case, and we're in the Windchill environment, and we're looking at the CAD view of this right now, right? So this is how it looks for the assembly and the structure for that. So no real big news flash here. We'll just take a look at the structure of this assembly and a little bit of a visualization. And the thought process here is I can use Illustrate either in integrated environment with Windchill, or I can use it separate or standalone. So it's not like it's a requirement to have Windchill as the driving force behind this, but the tools are all built to be integrated and work together. So thought process here is just to kind of step you through that process and show you a little bit about what that looks like. So here we are in the assembly. The next thing is we're going to take a look at this from the WT part standpoint. So really what we're driving towards here in the integrated environment is to get to a parts list. That's typically where the process is going to begin relative to creating the illustrations, right? So we're showing you here now this structure of the WT parts, and this is the manufacturing view of this. So think in terms of things you might add for the manufacturing or service processes. So here we have a manufacturing consumables kit, right? So things that would be used over and above what's in the CAD bill of material or the CAD structure. So items like the things you're not going to model up and put into the CAD assembly, like thread locker or tape or other paint or things like that have to be included in the bill of material somehow, but are not necessarily going to be modeled up in the CAD structure. So that's what we have here, and we have different tools for allowing the structure of that, whether we're dealing with things from the service perspective or the manufacturing perspective, and we're just looking at this in a different filter, right? So instead of looking at this from the design standpoint, we can look at that bill of material from the manufacturing or from the service standpoint, or particular serial number in that case. So just different ways that we can look at the model. And again, to sort of spend a minute just kind of talking about that, we can show you what this manufacturing structure browser looks like. Right, so what this is this is the tool that you use to reconfigure that bill of material to show you kind of what that looks like here we have the CAD view of this, or the design view, and we have a downstream view of that, right? So this is where I'm going to sort of restructure. I can copy and paste from the manufacturing, or sorry, the design side over here to give me the manufacturing bill of material or the service bill of material, and I can include in different things in the system. I can create new objects here. If I don't have that Loctite as an item in the system, I can build that and restructure and recraft that bill of material to capture what I need to do for manufacturing. From that, we'll create a parts list, right? So what we'll do then is we can generate a parts list using this functionality right here, and I can do that from either the top level, or I can pick an individual subassemblies and build out that parts list as needed. And so that's what we've got here. I've got one of those put together for this assembly. This is what the parts list looks like. And we have the different items. So this item list is typically what you're going to use for your callouts on your illustrations. So the little hot tags, or the balloons that you can include in your illustration. This is where you would actually begin that process of structuring the information that's going to show up in your illustration. So you get to number these things and reorder these things. And again, you're building out this bill of material. You can start with the engineering bill of material, but you can, again, restructure that as needed to get you into the configuration that you need for service or manufacturing. So ultimately, then we would go potentially and create a process plan. So I'll show you that when we're done here. That's kind of one of the end deliverables that we can create using the illustrations. And then the publication graphic. So this is where we begin the process of connecting up our illustration back into that CAD model. So I'll put this away for right now. This is Illustrate, right? So this is the Creo Illustrate toolset, and you're going to notice it looks pretty similar to Creo Parametric in the sense that it's got a ribbon over here on the left-hand side. We've got sort of a navigator with a structure very similar to what we had in our manufacturing structure. It's the same in that sense, and we have different tabs. We have figures. So what we're doing here is we're using this one central model that we would bring in. Again, you can either work in an integrated environment with Windchill, or you can do this in a standalone environment. And what you do here is just integrate this by either linking or embedding this object, a published representation of the model, and you can sort of mix and match things and bring in other items that wouldn't necessarily be configured with this initially. So if you had some tools or fixturing or something like that and you wanted to show that, you can bring that in and add that to your structure. And again, what we're looking at is one central model here in this illustration. We've got several different figures that we can, create, and they're all contained inside this one file. So it's not like I have to have a separate CAD model for the different displays or different configurations that I want to use in my illustration. So what I'm showing here with the different figures is just the different display types, right? So here I've got a different display, and what I'm looking at is just different ways to show the model, right? So when we're doing technical publications, there's different requirements for the type of a figure that we might want to create, whether we're going to a print type document or if we're publishing to the web or something like that. We might have different requirements for the images that we create. And we do that here in the figure tab. So we have different render modes. So really all I've done here in these first few figures is just toggle through different configurations for the display types. So it's pretty easy to change that back and forth. The next figure that I have here is showing a little bit of a disassembly sequence, and I'll show you how to do this. Again, this is just a different snapshot or different window that looks back into that model. And I've pulled off the handlebar and I've added in this nice little arrow that kind of helps me show the user what's going to happen here. So to do that type of thing, right? So if I just roll back here, we'll show this how this actually works. I'll pick on the component, and I can either pick on it from the graphic, or I can pick on it in the service bill of material. Note that it lights up in both places. And then I simply say I'd like to transform that. So there's keyboard shortcuts for that, but I'll just go ahead and show you in the ribbon where that lives. It's F3 for my transform, and I've also got a rotation, so I can either rotate that or transform that. So if we select linear motion there, you see that I have this gimbal that pops up, and I can grab on the hoop or the arrows and drag that component to its new location. And so we have the coordinate system here that's sort of integrated inside that part, right? So we're really showing the XYZ coordinate system, if you will, of that part. So just simply drag that off. If I'd like to plug in a specific dimension on that, I can plug in 250 units, and it'll move that off to a discrete location. So I know that I can kind of space things out the way that I'd like. So that's the simple move, right? It's pretty easy to do. If I'd like to put that back to its location, I can say, pick on that component and put them back, right? I can just say restore selected components to their original location, and it goes right back. So if I'd like to undo that, I can put that back out to that location. So it's really easy. So the point here is that I don't have to be a Creo parametric or real CAD jockey or real specific with my background in training with the CAD tool. This tool is really geared towards the illustrators that maybe don't have that strong background in the CAD content creation. We're just here to manipulate the geometry, kind of push and pull it around to its new location, create the different annotation features like insets and annotations, and get it ready to put into a document for publication. To create that little arrow, right? So I've got a library of symbols that comes off the installation, or I can go and create my own objects here, right? So to grab that arrow, right? So we have these default arrows that come out of the box. We'll go ahead and just place that at that location. And he works just like the other object, right? So I can transform and rotate that as I need to, right? So I can just kind of spin this thing around, type in a specific angle if I want, grab the hoop and kind of rotate it to its position and move it where I'd like it to be. So kind of and pretty intuitive. Just kind of get this thing oriented the way that you want by selecting the right hoop and moving it to where you'd like it to go. Just rotating that. And then if you'd like to translate that, right, I'll just go back into F3 mode here, and we'll just drag this back into this location. And if you want, you can change the properties of that, right? So just select that, and we can say, hey, let's go look at the properties. We may want to change the color, and go ahead and we'll just go back and take a look at this figure. This is exactly where we were in the process. We had just created that arrow and moved that to a new location. So again, similar process, just kind of stepping my way through the model, kind of creating different views of that subassembly and kind of moving things out. So each one of these different figures then can be published out as its own separate image, either raster or vector type format for output. Here we've got a nice little inset that we put in. Again, that's just done here with the insets. You just select the location you'd like to create the location of that at. Pick here to drag that out. We'll just say we'd like to go from here to there, create a nice little inset. And I can change the configuration of that as far as the display type and the size of that inset. If I'd like to get rid of that, we'll just hit the delete. So it's pretty intuitive as far as working with the different items for the display. Figure 9, right? So in this case, we were going to go and create maybe a little step animation, or we can do, well, let's do that first. Let's look at a sequence here. We'll create a little animation. So let's go back here to an animation. We'll create an animation here. So things I might want to do in this case. So right away, I can see I've got the little record dot here. So let's kind of zoom in on this just a little bit. A couple of things I can do, bring to your attention. I can record the content. What that means is I can record the placement of the items, and then I can also record the camera. So if I want to zoom in on something or change the camera angle for the next position, I can record either of those things separately. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and create the first step in this. We'll pick on the handle, the handlebar, the grip. We'll kind of drag that out, and again, we'll move that to 250 millimeters. So move that out. And then we'll say, let's apply an effect to this too on this other handle. Flash that to a certain color. We can do that. We'll flash that in sort of a yellow color. And then we'll drag that out to its location, something like that. And then we'll do something like this on the other handle, right? We'll say, same thing, we'll flash that. And we'll drag that out to its new location. And so it's recording these different tracks here, right? And if I pop this open down here in the track editor, I can resequence these things. So I can grab these two guys here and we'll drag them back over so that they'll move kind of together. So let's take a look at what we've done. We'll just rewind the player head and then play this back. So I can see I flash them, they go yellow, and then they move out. And then the next thing I might want to do is select them both and have them fade away. So I'm creating sort of a disassembly sequence, and then I can create an animation or a movie file from that and play that backwards so I can show the assembly process as to how to put the bicycle handlebars back together and all the other components. So we'll go here to our effects and we'll do the fade out and we'll continue on from there. So if we wanted to change the camera angle, we'll zoom in and show another step here, something like this. Turn the camera record off. Let's pick on the components here. We can actually say, let's take this headset, or this stem rather, and we can disassemble that and move that out. Now, the reason that that's selecting all of those components together is that goes back to your structure, your bill of material here. In this case, I've got a flat assembly, and so all of those items are going to move together. And that would kind of go back to how the CAD model was put together, or you can restructure that bill of material so you can get the different bolts and the different components to kind of move separately or independently. In this case, I've got that as one subassembly, and it's going to move that whole unit together in one step.
So I'm actually seeing one question in the queue. What are some of the output types and file formats that can be produced?
Sure. If we created an animation here, I'll just go in and just move one thing here just so I have this, and we'll move that. Then from here, when I export that, right, so now they have this sort of a video created, I'll have different formats. Well, actually one format, it's the Windows Media format, but I have different output types here as far as the frame rates and the quality, if you will, and the size of the image itself. So there's really just that one file type. It's the Windows Media format, but I can create different frame rates and have different resolutions for the videos that I create.
Perfect, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in the queue.
Okay.
Anything else you wanted to show?
Yeah, I was going to go to the item list here, right? So if we I'm going to turn off my animation here. We'll go ahead and say, let's toggle that off. Let's just go to the item list. So that's right here. So here I could get sort of a bill of material in text format that comes from the CAD system or from Windchill, depending upon where you're getting your information from. And if you wanted to put on the callouts, right? So those callout numbers are coming from your system here, Windchill in this case, and so you can create this bill of material and then export that back out. So no, you shouldn't have to retype that information back in into another system, so you can get this data directly from the system here. So if we pick on our items here, you can also change the attribute or the display, right? So if you have different items, this is the default out of the box configuration for item numbers, the tag numbers, the quantities, sequence numbers, part numbers. You can control the items that are the column displays, you know, the information in each of those items. So anyway, at the item list, right, so there's different items. You can call that out by individual items, or you can work on a individual subassembly inside there and get your balloon callouts from there directly.
Todd, I'm actually also seeing another question as well.
Sure. Yep.
Someone wants to know the compatibility with Creo to have the ability to correct descriptions or parts.
Compatibility with Creo, right? So the different file types, right? So what we're looking at here in this case is what's called a published representation. So there, you might know that as the PVZ file type or PVS. So when you're creating a new object, right? So what you'll typically do is you're going to do this process here, which is either linking or embedding. Right, so what you'll do here, if I just say I want to link in another item, so these are the different file types that Creo or the Creo Illustrate is going to understand. So by default, it's looking for the PVZs and PVSs. Those are your published representations that are coming from Windchill. You can save them out of Creo Parametric too. It's going to look for Creo parts. You can look for the Unite functionality, so you can work with non-native data, right? So things like SolidWorks, CATIA, and others, along with more typical neutral file types like IGES and STEP and VRML. Those can be brought in as well. So here's, that's what it looks like for the different file types. Here's a very similar type drawing with different figures that I've created. So here's where we have the callouts. So if I went back to my item list, here's where I was going to before. You can pick on the different parts, sub-assemblies, whether you're looking at the top level. And then for the items that you can put in the callouts, right, you can say no callout, or you can have a user-defined callout, or have an item number and quantity, and configure those callouts. And as far as manipulating those, it's pretty simple. You just pick on it, and then if you want to zoom in, there's a little tag on the end of the arrow if you want to move that to a new location or actually move that arrow. You know, it's pretty straightforward as far as doing that. These are some of the figures that I had for this drawing. It's a different drawing that's not actually tied to Windchill, but here's an example about what that might look like from the animation standpoint, right? Move those guys back out. I just applied different effects to that, and we zoom in, and then we can see that the different bolts get unscrewed and pulled out. We take off the front plate, unscrew the two bolts there, and I think that's as far as I went with that animation. And then, of course, then this could be exported back out to a Windows media file or movie file that you can save and embedded on different web pages and whatnot. Now, then the last thing that I was going to show was kind of back to the windshield piece, right? So if we go back to this process plan, so what we're doing here in this case is saying, okay, I've got different steps in this process plan where here's the different items that I'm using, right? And so in this step, and this is an assembly type thing. So this would be like your manufacturing planning type thing scenario. So here you've got the different components that are going in this first step. We've got a station where we're doing this, a workstation in the shop floor, different tools that are associated with that. Here we're using Loctite, and we're assigning a resource, a technician, that's actually going to be responsible for putting those items together. That's everything that's happening in step one, right? And then if we slide over here, there's additional information that we can plug in as far as setup time, labor time, processing time. So thinking about what we're doing here is we're looking at creating assembly instructions for putting this together, and we're leveraging the information for the illustration. So if I right click on that guy right here, I can say, hey, let's go edit the representation for that. And we're using the same sort of functionality as far as editing the call outs and the different annotations and other things that are going into this particular step. So it takes just a second here to load this up. Right, so here's notes that I've created. We've kind of made an exploded view. Here we've got some call outs that we're pointing back to the tools that we're going to need to put this particular step together. So that would be the first step in that assembly sequence. And then what we'll do next is show the work instructions. We'll generate these work instructions on the fly. So what Windchill's going to do now is go out and compile all that information for all of the individual steps. Right, and so this is the just work instruction wizard, right? So that we've got the different steps, live links back to the information, and then if I scroll down, I can see all the different steps that go into this. Right, here's the different components, and if I click on that, it's going to go ahead and pop open, prompt me login, of course. We'll get logged in as Pat, and then we'll go to the Creo View tool, in this case, to get a better view of what's going on with this component and how do I put it together. Now I can actually spin it around and kind of see how things all fit together. Right, so it's again using the Creo Illustrate and Creo View functionality to kind of tie together the information from your CAD design in this integrated environment in Windchill to create the work instructions for manufacturing, or you could do the same type of thing for downstream applications for service information manager, and online web pages for service documentation and those types of things. So the engine of this is the Creo Illustrate tool for creating the different annotations and the details for the different views.
Thank you everyone so much for joining us today on the webinar, learning how to create 3D animation.